For this exercise, download the Computer Screens Mockup folder, and you'll notice inside of this folder I'm giving you an image that has a variety of different computer screens that are off at an angle. In addition to this, these have kind of a unique challenge because they also have a little bit of a highlight or some light going across them. So to create an effective mockup, we need to be able to put our screens in perspective, but also add any kind of highlight to the idea or the design that we have. Also with this, I'm giving you the background design that we want to place within this design, just to test it out. So to get started, let's drag the Desk Screens JPEG into Photoshop and open it up from here. The first thing we need to do is to create a rectangle on its own layer for each of the different screens. Let's go to our Layers panel. I'm going to drag it off so we can see it. And then go to our Tools panel and select your Rectangle tool. With the Rectangle tool selected, make sure you're working in Shape mode and set the fill color to be something relatively bright, like I like a bright blue. We can keep the stroke at none for now. To get the exact dimensions that I'm giving you, click once on the middle of your document, and this will bring up a dialog box that will let you type in pixels the size that we want. So the height for this one is going to be 2,560 pixels by 1,600 pixels. And we'll say OK to that. And this will give us our rectangle, which is going to be larger than is necessary, but it's the right size. Once it's done, we can go to our Layers panel, and before we do any transformations, we need to change this rectangle into a smart object. With the rectangle one selected, choose your layer options and choose Convert to Smart Object. Now that I've got that symbol on there, I can double click and rename this layer Laptop Screen. Now I can transform this to fit the area of my screen. Let's go up to Edit, down to Transform. I like to start off by scaling it down just so I can see it because it's so large. With it scaled down and a little bit more manageable, now I can go back up to Edit and Transform. Let's choose Distort to place each one of these corners right where they are to line up. Again, if it's off by a little bit, that's okay because we're going to go back in later and turn on a layer mask to clean up each individual edge. Another thing to note is that the edges of this are going to go off the edge of your document, and if it does, that's fine too. So that top left and top right hand side should be going off your document just like that. Now with that done, let's turn on our layer mask. Going back to our Layers panel, let's turn off visibility for our laptop screen. Go down to your background layer. Let's grab our quick selection tool and let's quickly click and drag over this entire screen to select just the screen. Once all the little bits are selected, do make sure to get it on top of the text as well. Once all that's selected, go back to your layers, turn on and select the laptop screen. I do see I've missed a little part. Let's get that. And then let's turn on a layer mask for that area. Now that the layer mask has been added, let's add a shine on top of this area. Going back up to Select, let's reselect the last thing that we had. In this case, it was our screen. Going over to our Tools panel, locate your Gradient tool, and in the Gradient tool options, click on the down arrow and select the second option to go from the foreground color to transparent, and make sure you're working in a linear gradient. I'm going to set my foreground color, it's already set, but make sure it's a solid white, and say OK to that. And since my shine is coming to the top left to the bottom right, we're going to go to our layers and create a new layer, and let's call this our laptop shine. Inside of this layer, I'm going to click on the top left and kind of go down to the bottom right, and you can see how that easily adds that little bit of shine to it. If I don't like that, I can do Command Z and undo, and then click and drag until I get a shine that I like. With that laptop shine layer still selected, change its blending mode to screen and change the opacity, dropping it down a little bit around 70 to 80%. The last thing we want to do for the laptop is to group all of these together. So returning to our layers panel, select both the shine and the rectangle area layers, and then click on the little folder at the bottom. This will put it into group 1. We'll double click and rename this group as our laptop group. If I need to test it, I can open it up. Let's double click the icon for it. Then we'll go up to File and Place. Let's locate the scripture type background JPEG. We can place it in here, and if necessary, we can make it a little bit larger to fill up the entire area. That looks good. Now if I hit save and close it out, you can see how it automatically is placed inside of this area as well. All right, now let's do the same for the other screens. To repeat the process, I'm going to pull up this time the phone screen. Let's go to our layers panel and I'll close up my laptop. We need to start off by choosing our rectangle tool. Do make sure you're working in shape mode. Set your fill color to be something light like a blue with no stroke. And then with one click, this will bring up our dialog box where we can type in our width and our height. In our case, it'd be 640 wide by 1136 pixels tall. We'll say OK. Before we do anything else and make any kind of transformation, let's change this rectangle to a Smart Object layer. We'll go up to our layer options and choose Convert to Smart Object. Now that we've got that symbol, we can start to distort it and place it right where it needs to go. So grabbing our Move tool, we'll bring this up. I like to scale mine down to something manageable. And then if I want to distort it, we can go to Edit, Transform, and Distort. And place each corner matching the corner of the phone screen. Remember, if you're off by a little bit, that's okay. It's actually better to be too much than not enough, because later on we're going to add a layer mask on top of this to clean every little bit up. Now that it's in place, I'll hit return and lock it in. Now let's create our layer mask. To do this, go to your layers panel, turn off visibility, and let's select our background layer. In our tools panel, I like to use the quick selection tool, because with one click and drag we can quickly and easily select the entire screen. And then go back to our layers, turn on and select that rectangle that we have. And from there we can add a layer mask, which will mask everything off. While we still have that layer selected, let's also rename it. I'm going to double click the name. We'll call this phone screen. The next thing we need to do is to add the shine going across it. So let's create a new layer again. We'll create and call this layer Screen Shine. We need to reselect our last selection. Go back up to Select and choose Reselect. That'll recreate our screen. Then we can grab our gradient tool. Up in the top, make sure you're working on the second option of going foreground to transparent, and it's got just a linear gradient. And I've got a foreground color of white. All I've got to do is click and drag. That'll create the little shine going across it. The next thing we need to do with the screen shine selected is set the blending mode to screen and drop the opacity down to somewhere between 60 and 80, depending on what you want. We can now go up to select and deselect the whole thing. And if we want, we can start to test this area too. So to test it, we can double click our screen. There it is there. Let's place the artwork inside of it. Let's go to File, down to Place Embedded. Choose our scripture type background. It's going to be super small, but we can scale it up. Hit return. Great. Now when we hit Command S to save it, Command W to close it out, now you can see what it would look like inside of that screen. Last thing we can do is select both of the new layers for the phone and the screen shine. Click on your folder and then double click the group name. We'll call this one the phone. Now let's do the same for the tablet. Scroll over so we can see it a little bit better. First thing we need to do is grab our rectangle tool. Do make sure you're working in shape mode with blue or a light color as your fill with no stroke. One click and type in the width and the height. So in this case the width is 1536 by 2048. We'll say OK. Before we do any kind of transformation, take your rectangle, go up to the options under layers, and let's create or convert this to a smart object. Now that it's a smart object, we can double click the name and call it tablet screen. Now we can select that screen. I'll zoom out a little bit so I can see what I'm working with. Select the screen, let's scale it down. Something nice and manageable. Once it's small, we can go up to Edit and Transform. Let's distort it and actually place each of the points right where it needs to be. Hit return. Great. The next thing we need to do is to add a layer mask on top of it. So turn off your visibility, select your background layer, get your quick selection tool, and click and drag across this to select the entire inner area. With everything selected, let's return to our layers, turn on the tablet and select the tablet, then turn on layer mask. Now it's all nice and masked inside of that. Next thing we need to do is to add our screen shine. So I want to make a new layer. We'll call this layer Screen Shine for our tablet. We need to reselect it. Go up to Select and Reselect. And then we choose our gradient tool. With the gradient, make sure you're going from white to transparent, linear, white foreground. Click and drag and create a simple white gradient across that. Change the blending mode to screen. Drop the opacity down to about 60 to 80%. And then we can test our screen. Double click your tablet screen, smart object. Go up to File, down to Place. We'll place the scripture type background, scale it up. Make sure it fits well, all looking good. Whenever we save it, close it down. Now we see what our screen looks like on all three different screens. Oh, the last thing we need to do is select both of these. Let's put them inside their own folder and rename the group Tablet. Awesome. With all three screens completed, the last thing that you need to do is to save up the Photoshop file. So we'll do File and Save As. You can call it Desk Screens with Photoshop as the format. When you hit Save, that Photoshop file is what you'll upload to Moodle and turn in for your exercise grade.